Hi, my name is Sarah Templeton, and I am a fully qualified counsellor and CBT therapist and coach. But ironically, through all that training, I didn't know I was ADHD because it hadn't been picked up. And worse still, through all that training, and I'm talking 1.5 years coaching training, 4.5 years counselling training, and 1 year's CBT therapy counselling, not once, ever, once was the word ADHD used. Not once. Yet, people with ADHD, especially undiagnosed ADHD, are more likely than anybody else to end up in therapy. Now, why is that? That's not just a flippant thing I'm saying there. Why are people with undiagnosed ADHD more likely to end up in therapy than anybody else? Very simple. With ADHD, always comes a level of depression and anxiety. Some people will have one majorly and the other not at all. Some people have a bit of both. I'm much more prone to the anxiety side of things, but I do get depressed, but usually only if something's happened. I'm not generally a depressed person, but there are some people with ADHD who are permanently depressed. So people with ADHD, undiagnosed, with anxiety and depression, where do they go? They go and see a counsellor, don't they? A lot of the time, if they can afford it, or they go for free therapy if they can afford it. Yet these same professionals, these counsellors, in all the years training they have, ADHD isn't mentioned. This has to change. When I was training, there was a little bit of training in mental health, a little bit. We were taught about borderline personality disorder as it was. We were taught about self-harm. We were taught about suicide. We did do quite a lot about suicide. And we did a smattering of other mental health conditions. But ADHD wasn't mentioned once, and I mean once, in 5.5 years of counselling training. This has to change. Ironically, of the 16 people on my counselling diploma, which is the last 2 years of your counselling training, of the 16 of us, I have since worked out that 6 of those were ADHD. So 6 of the 16 had ADHD, were training to be counsellors because ADHD people have more compassion and empathy than other people. And we were completely unaware we even had the condition. And yet there were 6 of us sitting in that room with ADHD and we didn't know. So I'm very, very passionate now that ADHD is included in counselling training. It's massively important. I have a very good relationship with my ex-tutor and I'm going in there to train all her students who are leaving college this year because she understands the importance of counsellors being aware of ADHD. And I will also like to talk about whether or not you should mention it to your clients. There are some people who say, oh, you shouldn't mention the possibility of a mental health condition to a client. Rubbish, absolute rubbish. People with ADHD have a much higher chance of self-harm and a much higher risk of suicide. So by not mentioning the possibility of a condition to somebody, I firmly believe that is unethical. It's unethical not to suggest it. A little story, a client of mine had a neighbour who lived across the road from her. She said for years she'd known this neighbour was ADHD and then one day this neighbour killed herself. The client of mine could not forgive herself because for years she had never told that woman that she thought she was ADHD. I will never put myself in that situation. Whenever I suspect ADHD, and I've never been wrong, I'm sure I will be one day, but so far I've never been wrong. If ever I suspect ADHD, I will always mention it to people. Sometimes now people are saying, actually, yes, I'm already diagnosed, which is fantastic. A lot of other people haven't even thought of it as a possibility, exactly the same as me. I was 51, very nearly 52, sitting in front of a counsellor who did understand ADHD. When she said to me, has anybody suggested you're ADHD? I looked at her I literally went, no, why? And she said, because I think you've got it. Go home and Google it. Well, I went home and Googled it and my entire life made sense. My entire life, literally. Why I interrupted people, why I found people boring, why I was impulsive and did stupid things, why I couldn't stop spending money, Why I was brilliant at business, yet kept falling over and breaking things and damaging things. I could be really astute and really business savvy and really, really clever in business, and yet gormless when it came to loads of other things. Nothing about my life had made sense until that night. That counsellor made sense of my whole life. So by not introducing the possibility to somebody, I firmly believe it's unethical. And yes, you might get a clout round the head, or you might get somebody say, "How dare you?" I never have. But I still think that's better than finding out that that person went and hung themselves that night because their emotional dysregulation, which goes with ADHD, was such that they were very depressed. Nobody knew, and they took their life. Now, had they sat in front of an ADHD psychiatrist, been diagnosed and been on the meds, they may not have done that. And I'm never prepared to take that chance. So anybody I see, child or adult, I will always introduce that possibility and always say, you might want to have a Google, or you might want to go and have a little read of ADHD, see if any of it resonates. It's unethical not to, in my belief. But I firmly, firmly believe that ADHD should very much be included in counselling training. What's the point of not? So many of the clients you're going to sit in front of will have ADHD and they won't know about it. And if you as the therapist don't know about it, what use are you going to be? Very little is the answer. So therapists do need to be aware of it. They do need to understand it. They do need to understand the different presentations of ADHD. And they do need to work out a way of introducing it to clients so that they're comfortable with it. And also the client receives the information and isn't offended. It's easy to do. I've done it with literally probably thousands of people now, not hundreds, probably thousands. So for counsellors, it's critical that you understand what ADHD is. For starters, you could be saving a life, saving many lives, and you will most certainly be transforming lives by understanding what ADHD is. So please don't put off getting to understand it. Go and buy the books. There's lots of very good ones on ADHD. Find out about ADHD and badger your tutors. Badger them. Say, we want to know about ADHD. It's going to come into our therapy rooms. We want training on it. Get a specialist in. There's loads of people that train in ADHD, including Head Stuff, which is my company, but there's hundreds of others. Get somebody in who understands ADHD so that therapists leave their training fully equipped to deal with any undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD person who ends up in front of them in a therapy chair. Because as I say, at the very least, you'll be transforming lives and you could actually be saving lives.